Excited for everybody to join today. We're going to be talking about the state of sustainability and how to make sustainability a reality at your company. No doubt it's a topic that is near and dear to all our hearts, and certainly one that we're excited to talk about. I've got a very distinguished and great panel of people that are likely also as excited about this topic as I am. I'm going to introduce them today, and then we're going to have a great interactive conversation over the next 45 minutes to an hour. I'd like to introduce John Blake. John is a Senior Director Analyst in Gartner's Supply Chain Practice, leading the research agenda for packaging applications and best practices. John has more than 30 years of experience in packaging engineering and packaging strategic development. Before joining Gartner in 2018, John worked with multiple packaging engineering R&D leadership roles in CPG and small parcel industry. John also serves as an adjunct professor and advisor to the Rutgers School of Packaging of Engineering. So excited to have you join, and thank you, John. Excited to also introduce Prashant Jagtap. Prashant founded TRIAC with the vision of bringing sustainability mainstream. TRIAC's mission is to provide easy-to-use software solutions that enable design and manufacturing of sustainable products and packaging. For over 25 years, Prashant has worked with leading international brands and global manufacturers from different industries to help improve their product and packaging development and launch processes. As president and CEO of TRIAC, he routinely consults with leading companies to reduce their product and package environmental footprint. Welcome, Prashant, to this topic. Excited to also introduce Michelle Carvel. Michelle is the Chief Operating Officer of Lorax EPI, a company providing specialist EPR and sustainability reporting services. She started working in this sector in 2004 and developed her career by specializing in product stewardship, producer responsibility programs, and their impacts on the producers, which led to the founding of Lorax in 2014. Combining a passion for data with a desire to manage and remove the complexities associated with the legislation for producers, Michelle's focus at Lorax is to promote and simplify their ever-expanding range of reporting requirements their clients find themselves obligated by. So thank you and welcome, Michelle. We're excited today to go through a quick agenda. We're going to be spending about 5 minutes, as we just did, getting kicked off. We're going to really jump into the reports, and we're going to talk about the survey we did, and most importantly, the takeaways and the learnings that we can all gather from that. We have some additional questions that we're going to be asking the panel after that, because during the results review, we're going to be talking to the panel. And then ultimately, we'll just do a closing and talk about kind of where do we go from here. So what's interesting is we've had the best results we've ever had from any sort of survey that we put out. We had over 500 respondents to this survey that we've put out on the state of sustainability, up from several years ago when we did the same survey by almost twofold. The other great takeaways about the data that you're going to be seeing and that we're going to be talking about is it was really across all industries. If you look at the top respondents, they came out of food and bev at 28%, healthcare and pharmaceutical at 24%, and 20% at beauty and cosmetics. Now, obviously, there are some companies that go over multiple categories, so you see that this does not add up to 100, as some people might be responding from multiple origins. The good part about this, though, I think, from the data standpoint that we look at, is it's really coming from all industries. This is not a singular respondent by a particular industry or type of company, but rather a really good look globally and across many verticals as to the impact of sustainability and really what the state of it is today. So excited that we had such a great cross-reference in terms of companies and types of products. The same was true too in types of roles. Again, somebody might be having or managing several different positions, but again, the top 3 positions that responded were in packaging. Definitely, as we'll continue to talk about today, very influential in the state of sustainability. Product development, obviously, as we talked about in the opening introductions of people, this is really key and critical that we start producing and creating products from the beginning that are sustainable. And then ultimately, procurement and sourcing. You know, when those are out there trying to get and gather the products the companies need, they're very important to the sustainability initiatives. So just like the great broad scope that we had on types of companies, we also have this data coming in from numerous different roles that are impacted by sustainability today. The other really interesting thing, a big change from years gone by when we introduced the same type of survey, is that we've really had a growth in the C-suite respondents. Almost 30% was at some level of C-suite. We obviously have 39% manager and director. So a good amount of the surveys coming back, not only were from numerous different verticals, different positions, but very high in the organization. And we've seen, and we'll talk about it through the data suite, is that we've seen the conversation elevating to a higher level within these companies. So I think the last 3 slides should give a great preview that the data that we're going to talk about today is very rich in its value. So the first survey respondent that we're going to look at, it really talks about what's companies' focus about sustainability. And years ago, again, these numbers have come up dramatically, but we see there's an overwhelming commitment to sustainability. We see that this has increased 10% just in a year or two alone. So we see almost every company that we can imagine out there, again, backed by the survey results from all different industries, is focused on sustainability. John, I'd love to throw a question to you and get your thoughts on this, is certainly this position you sit in. What are the reasons you've seen the commitment on sustainability increase?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, and I'd say there's really many at this stage. So, and I think we see that reflected in the almost unanimous response to the question. And, just to start off, really the consumer desire, that remains strong. We continue to see this in the data and various research and surveys. Customer demand is growing. So at Gartner, we see this with retailers, manufacturers, business-to-business organizations. So their demand also is increasing. And I actually think that's the next wave in this sustainability space. And we also see an increasing emphasis on Scope 3 emissions, which include products and packaging, that we manufacture and consume. And then finally, I'll speak to the growing global legislation, and it's really shifting sustainability from a historically voluntary action to a required action or a legislated action. So those are really what I say, again, multiple reasons to drive this commitment to sustainability.
No, I think those great thoughts, John. I think that in general, most of us all have wanted to be more sustainable. I think what's putting the energy, or what I call the bookends, behind it is really the regulatory is really coming in strong now and making what I think most of us have as a desire, make it really try to become a reality. So great insights, John, and certainly it's interesting from the survey to see how strong that is from a corporate perspective and a people perspective. Again, from the survey respondents, a lot of C-suite involvement in this survey, so it shows that appetite is there. I think this is probably the most compelling of the data that we gathered, and obviously this data is available in our report in much broader scope, but in just snapshot, it's one thing to have the initiative, one thing to agree that it's something that we need to work on, but the reality is we have to be able to pay for it to some degree. And so what we've seen is huge change, probably one of the biggest changes in the surveys from 2019 to 2022 is the money coming behind the commitment. And really, so the question was, does your company or team have a budget for sustainability initiatives? And we've seen that grow from 32% to 80%. And that I always look at a interesting result is twice the company survey. And so I think this jump is really significant. Companies are committed, they're allocating a budget, which we all know is how initiatives get pushed. There's over 50% increase in this respondent category of the survey. So I'd love to throw it to you, Michelle, now. How are you seeing budget increases result in a change in demand for your solutions?
Well, I guess, first of all, I think people are really looking now for long-term solutions. And so I think that's where we certainly see an increase in the investment coming, because they're looking for something that's going to be here for the long term and to be able to help them manage the sustainability goals, which they as a business have committed to. But equally, I can also see quite a lot of change in the types of work that companies are doing. Previously they might have had small projects here or there, or they might be looking at a small solution here or there. But now there is definitely a much bigger feel that they're trying to connect all these pieces together. And we certainly as a company have seen a lot more focus going into the data management side of things, which typically was always an area that was underlooked at, is probably the nicest way to say it. But investing in data collection and investing in data systems is probably one of the biggest things that we see companies doing, because that supports a lot of the sustainability reporting they have to do and that they've committed to.
Yeah, I love two parts. Obviously, I'll always love the fact that the data is getting the importance it belongs or deserves, and certainly the impact it'll have. But I also appreciate what you said, where it's really gone from kind of these spot initiatives to a more long-term look. And so I agree, that's definitely a trend we're seeing. So great insights there, Michelle. Prashant, I'd ask the same question. How are you seeing these budget increases and the demand for your solution?
Yeah, so first of all, Matthew, thank you for having me on the panel. One direct outcome of this increased focus in goals as well as the budget is that we are seeing a lot of our existing customers who have been, getting their toes wet, so to speak. They are now just buying a lot more licenses and spreading this, in other parts of their business. And they are also investing in a more broader suite of things as well. So a lot of things that we have been doing, like advanced reporting, EPR, analytics, we are seeing a lot of interest in that. And a lot of our prospects that we are talking to, we are getting a lot of enterprise level or broader and bigger deals that we're talking to. So yes, definitely, I think I see companies going after proven software solutions that are out there. And this is, it has never been a better time to be in the sustainability business.
Yeah, I love what kind of putting the comments that you had, Michelle, together. I love the thought process, which I agree with, is instead of kind of being, this one person hidden in the closet working on kind of these offline projects, it's now becoming more widespread through the organization, more long-term thinking of how to really tackle these initiatives. And so great insights, obviously, from both of you, and certainly a great trend. And one of the hopes we have from those listening into the webinar is, as you may or may not be challenged internally with budgetary restraints or inability to kind of think long-term on this, you can really point to your leadership that this is the trend, that companies across all kind of verticals and across all different disciplines are really going down the path of longer-term solutions and deeper solutions. The next one I was interested, it kind of goes along with that, is about commitment. We've seen that commitment is critical, and based upon your allocated sustainability budget amount, how would you rate your company's commitment to sustainability? I think the interesting part is you can have a budget or you can have initiatives, but may or may not have a lot of backing, and therefore obviously won't have tremendous outcomes. We're seeing that basically if you combine those, 75% of respondents are committed or highly committed. I think it's the view of all of us in this call today, and certainly this panel, that we really get rid of those four bottom categories and move everybody into highly committed. But it's a great trend. We're seeing that this commitment is being backed up by leadership. We're seeing this commitment's being backed up by regulatory. We're seeing this commitment's being backed up just by the consumer. And really, I think with this commitment, along with the budget, and then ultimately tools that can get success going forward, we're going to see some great energy changing and making things better as we go forward. So again, another great trend from the data we're seeing over the last couple of years. It's also another interesting trend. I think this goes along with the survey respondents too, is which departments in your company have sustainability goals, and select all that apply. And so obviously you could have multiple departments involved here. But what we're really seeing is that these goals are reaching every department, and the role, and now sustainability is everybody's job. I think we kind of have seen a historical trend that there's one person kind of ordained as this person. That was a big step forward. But what we're really seeing now is it's really spreading across and throughout the organization, which is hypercritical to success. I think anybody that's worked with larger companies or companies in general, if you don't have multi-departmental buy-in, you really just don't get things moving forward. So I'd love to open this question, John, to you. And why do you think sustainability responsibility is broadening into multiple roles versus historically?
Yeah, Matthew, I guess I would say it takes a village to deliver sustainability. When we think about our product, our packaging, and our services, Making changes, as an organization to what we buy, what we make, and what we sell. I mean, the fact is it's incredibly complicated, and no single function or department can drive the changes and the scale of change that are needed if they're just working independently on their own. So I think that's really an acknowledgement that to move forward, we need to engage the entire organization. In addition, I would say that the goals focused on reducing carbon footprint and greenhouse gases are increasingly at the corporate level, and really to deliver these requires engagement and commitment of multiple departments working collectively. So I think there's an element of acknowledgement of the complexity, but also if we're going to decrease the carbon impact of our entire organization, we have to do that across multiple, if not all of our departments and functions within our organization.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting from a hindsight perspective to think that we could have thought of it any other way. But I know all on the panel are certainly lovers of packaging, but certainly John, I know you and I have been bantering for years about that packaging has to increase its role at the C-suite, certainly at the board table. But it's exciting to see that packaging is moving up the chain of importance and getting a voice, because I think it's so critical in general, but definitely critical in this area. But I'd ask you, how do you envision packaging's role kind of in this cross-functional sustainability effort going forward?
Yeah, I believe it's critical for packaging engineers and packaging engineering as a function to be a true champion of communication and collaboration. And I would say packaging, say as a material, its role in protecting products, the consumer safety, cost management, it really needs to be up front and center in the decision making. So as well as the opportunities and challenges in areas, such as the recycling infrastructure, supplier capabilities, the impact on supply chain and manufacture, all these need to be addressed. And I think, all of these areas, this, really looking through the whole value chain and supply chain needs to be assessed when setting the sustainable product and packaging strategies. And I think that deep understanding is really where the packaging engineering function, can, and should continue to, take a leading role.
Yeah, I look at it as really exciting times today and in the future for packaging. I think it's packaging people and their responsibilities are growing exponentially. So it's certainly exciting times. I also think this is another great survey respondent for kind of an internal litmus test. If you're listening in and you're wondering how's your company doing compared to its peers or compared to the industry, I think one good thing is to just do some reflection. Is every department that's critical to sustainability goals involved? And if not, this is a good opportunity to take this in front of them and show them that, in other companies, other industries, that they're seeing an increased awareness of these multi-departments participating in these important initiatives. I think the other thing, and this certainly starts to become kind of near and dear to what I am passionate about, is that companies want to be sustainable. I've always believed in general that most people want to do that, but really struggle when it comes to getting things done. And part of that struggle is just not the infrastructure. We certainly talked about budget, we talked about multi-department, et cetera. But ultimately, when you got to report on it, kind of where are you at today, where are you going tomorrow? I don't ever believe this is a one and done scenario. This is something we're going to live and breathe for hopefully forever, and it's going to morph and change on us. Is we have to be able to report, we have to be able to pull data, we have to be able to become actionable. And we see that between really the top two respondent categories, a challenge is extremely challenging. I think it's very fair to say that most companies, if not all, find this very challenging. And so when you're trying to aggregate data or track data or really start or find a starting part, one of the biggest challenges is just quite frankly reporting and the value of that data to make that happen. I think we've all been in those meetings where we've sat around with people we know and they're very stressed because they have to create outcomes off of something that maybe was said at a high level within the company or within the community. And they're trying to figure out how to do that because they just don't have the data at their fingertips. I'm really passionate about that. That's where it starts, that we have to avail, we have to get this data in front of people so that I think when you do that, that what happens is the passion can come through and become actionable in the sustainability initiatives. I think the other interesting thing that this is only growing. I think that you're going to have to not only be responsible internally, I think we're going to be responsible, as we know from John's comments and others early on, that obviously externally, whether it's a geography, whether it's a consumer base, a retailer, there's going to be obviously high accountability to what's going on, and accountability to just be accountable in sharing, accountability in terms of economics, et cetera. And so I think the other thing that we found interesting through this data was that the need is only growing, and how often you report on sustainability, and we see a much higher frequency rate than we'd seen historically. A couple of years ago, we saw a very low frequency rate, maybe an annual report or preparing for a quarterly meeting or biannual meeting. And really, I think I've always been passionate that it shouldn't be an event, that we shouldn't have to go gather all this data for an event. It really should be an ongoing exercise that we're constantly monitoring and looking at. It's kind of like taking, some of your statistics through when you go for an annual physical. It's great to do that once a year, but are you monitoring those things every day, every week, and every month, so that at the end of the year, the results are not surprising? I was interested in this area, and so I'd love to throw to you, Michelle. What challenges are you seeing companies face when it comes to collecting data?
Well, I mean, certainly the biggest challenges that most companies have with collecting data are truly understanding where the data might be. And companies often have very fragmented systems in the background. They have third-party products, they have specifications in all different formats, PDFs or Excel files. And I think trying to just bring all of that together makes it a very difficult job for a business to get started with data management and data collection. And probably the biggest thing on top of all of that, which is being driven by this increase in the sustainability reporting requirements, is about the granularity of data requirements that are now needed. So it's not only a case anymore of just actually finding it and plugging it all together to try and make a single picture, but also trying to make sure that they actually have the level of granularity that's really needed to be able to sustain and be able to actually deliver on those reports that are required.
Yeah, you mentioned before, and I think it's very appropriate, and I think this is a good part of the takeaway of this particular information share, is that the awareness of that granular level of data is growing, and the importance of that data. I think early on, there's a little frustration. Well, just tell me what it is, and I think there's enough realization that data is missing. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, when companies first started to do a lot of this reporting, they also took the impression, let's do the best we can. What do we currently know? Maybe there's a few finger in the air metrics that we're having to use here, but that doesn't stand anymore. And now that data is certainly under scrutiny from NGOs, from third parties, and of course, businesses are improving it as they go along. Now that requirement, as well as the legal drivers, which are coming from things like EPR, that requirement for very granular data is really front and center of a lot of people's agenda at the moment.
Prashant, I know you and I've talked about this or kind of bantered on this topic. I'd love to get your thoughts on really the gap in data and really the focus on it going forward.
Yes. So Matthew, we have been working with customers for more than 12 years now. And a lot of our customers are really leaders in their respective industries. But even with these leaders, what we have seen is, data just happens to be in silos, or data is in multiple IT systems, like Michelle said, or, it's in documents and PDFs and spreadsheets, etc. On top of that, what we have seen is data quality and completeness is also an issue with most people. And traditionally, systems like PLM or ERP, where the bill of materials used to be placed, their purpose was different, so they were collecting different data, right? So what we have now, over the years developed is something called the bill of material for sustainability, and that obviously carries a lot of the same information, but it also collects a lot more information that helps us make more accurate calculations for various things. Now, and this also talks about how instead of a top-down sort of approach for reporting, where companies just say, well, how much of this material did I buy? And just use that data as an approximation, a more bottoms-up, granular bill of material related data is really what is required for the purpose of accuracy. And so we love telling our customers, where it makes sense, that a system like a spec management system like SpecRite is really, the spec first approach is really how they ought to be going after this thing.
No, and obviously I agree with that. I think the key is that, hopefully, and we really believe, and we're seeing this, that it's enriching the experience of using, great tools like Michelle and yours, and really making it more valuable, more actionable, and more timely. Again, not to make this an event. We want this to be an ongoing activity that's happening at a very high repetition level. I think this is always an interesting topic. Companies are tackling sustainability in a variety of ways, and we ask kind of what are those initiatives or key focus areas. And one kind of from the SpecRite perspective is there's a million ways to be sustainable, and it's really up to the company to evaluate where they're seeing the most negative impact and work to improve. And they could be doing that from a kind of inside out or outside in view. But our role really in terms of getting the data organized and the method and methodology that you can become more sustainable is not really to define for these companies what we think sustainability is, but rather when they create that definition, influenced however they're influenced, that we really give them the experience and the value of being able to be actionable against those beliefs. And so that's kind of our perspective on it. But moving forward, Prashant, what are some of the key sustainability metrics you're seeing companies focus on today?
Yeah, so we find it actually very helpful to look at metrics in a external and internal way. So we try to kind of think of it that way. Externally, now companies, talk about a lot of different things. It could be, circularity, ESG, eliminating plastics. So they are part of various plastics pacts. Obviously, what you have on, the answers from your survey about increasing PCR content or recyclability. EPR fees is again, another thing that, people have as reducing EPR fees as being one of the metrics. Internally, what we are basically helping our customers do is benchmark their packaging and benchmark it in terms of how does it compare to others in your industry? Are you being efficient in packaging from a weight perspective, from a volume perspective, shelf life, cold chain performance, reuse? So now these are more functional metrics, but what we find is helping focus the packaging department or design activities and R&D activities on these kind of things really helps towards the external metrics.
No, I think it's appropriate. Again, as you see these kind of cross-functional teams working on it, and everybody has a little bit different view on whether they're working on the corporate initiatives or external initiatives. It's really, again, I think organizing the data correctly, putting it through, great tools to be able to be actionable, and then obviously these outcomes can be attainable. But love to hear kind of what you're seeing, Michelle, from a perspective of these metrics or what people are focusing on today.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think a lot of the companies that we work with are currently making big global commitments about what they're going to do with their data, and so to help support them, that comes in the guise of reduction of or increase of recycled content, reduction of virgin content. It comes in net material usage or switching to maybe more bio-based functions. And the big metric, which I think I come across with everybody, is what we call RRC, which is the 100% reusable, recyclable, compostable metric. And we have a number of companies who are tracking against that and being able to look at their data and understand. And those, that term sort of recyclable can be looked at then in so many other ways. Is it changing material? Is it looking at how materials are put together in a format to make a packaging bill of materials so that it can be accepted in recycling systems? Can it be redesigned in some way? Can you put reuse functions into it? So we look, those for us are certainly the big ones. And then what comes in with an EPR side here is also that layer of consumer engagement. Can I label it correctly to help a consumer understand how it should be correctly disposed of in market? So certainly, and also within that EPR sort of world that we live in, a lot of those metrics come up too. It comes up in recycled content, in bonuses that you can get, and it comes up as well with how you use different packaging components together to create a more recyclable piece of packaging. So I think they're certainly the biggest focus ones we see.
No, that's great. And you actually jumped on kind of my next question, which kind of you've already kind of gone through, which is I think you're going to see these converging of initiatives, where it's not really one predominant one, but multiple ones. And you mentioned that a little bit, Marcel, but you see where I think the initiatives kind of going forward is there going to be multiple outcomes trying to be attained. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Trying to redesigning a package for a product actually can affect a lot of other things it can do. It can end up being better for EPR cost. It can be better for recyclability. It might also bring in reuse. There's a number of different initiatives that even one redesign could change. And so I think people really are trying to focus in on what can they do, which will have the most impact when they're looking at what sustainability initiatives they can focus on.
No, I appreciate that. And Prashant, what are your thoughts about these kind of converging initiatives and the future where we see companies going?
So we do work with a lot of different initiatives with our customers. In fact, we probably offer the most complete life cycle analysis solution to analyze a variety of these things. Now, what we bring to the table, I think, is because we work through with leaders in CPG, pharma, electronics, all of that. So we have accumulated a lot of best practices in this area. And so those are what also helps our customers and what we bring to the table.
I think that's a perfect lead into the next kind of information we're going to share. What companies looking to the experts for help? And you just mentioned that. I think this, again, from a survey respondents, we're seeing that all the industries are focused on this. All different types of jobs. The job function is broadening, and certainly what we see is this rise in the need to bring in experts. And I think one of the challenges that there's a lot of them saying that they are out there, but really, what's the breadth of knowledge? I love how long Lorax and Triac have been around, and in terms of really seeing the evolution, seeing the challenges, and really trying to look forward to what the future looks like. And the question asked, does your company or team work with Sustainability Coalition or Foundation? And what we're seeing is that there's 73% are. There's almost a 55% increase since the last survey. And so we see companies are really looking to these third parties to help guide them. I think from multiple different facets, they're doing that. And we know that because they're struggling to track their goals, they don't really have the idea of where they're becoming more sustainable. It's not really surprising that these organizations are there to help level set. And I think the yes respondents show that there's this need, this desire to become actionable, and now this outreaching to find people to help them do that. I think I'm probably going to open this up to everybody, but I'll start with you, John. We talked about the increase in legislation and regulatories, but what should companies be looking for? Kind of what's coming next? What's the future look like? If you give us a little preview of what you think.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. And I actually think this is one of the most interesting and impactful aspects around sustainability and sustainable packaging. So I've been in the packaging industry for just over 30 years, and this is the most activity I've ever seen in the past couple of years, and it just feels like it's going to keep increasing. So, we have plastic packaging taxes just came into effect this year. So in the UK, took effect April 1st. Spain has announced they're going to implement in January, and then we're looking at Italy and a few other countries that are expected to follow. And the packaging taxes is really compelling because now there's an enhanced level of liability and accountability for organizations to report on that. And then was mentioned earlier in the webinar around the packaging extended producer responsibility, or packaging EPR. So this has been around for many years in different parts of the world, but even just in the past 12, 18 months, we've seen now California be the 4th state in the US to pass legislation around packaging EPR. And then earlier this year, the UN passed a resolution to develop a legally binding agreement to address plastic pollution, and they're looking to do this by 2024. So I think, again, that's another aspect that we need to keep an eye on. And I'd also like to mention, it's not legislation, but these voluntary programs such as the problematic plastic list. So in the US Plastic Pack issued a list of problematic plastics. And I think, again, it's important for organizations, to be aware of, what do they use that's on that list. If you're developing something new, does it include those materials? And is there a path to reducing or eliminating those in the future? So I think all those areas, again, just kind of mounting activity in this legislation and regulation space.
Yeah, no, I agree, and certainly going to send it to the others for their comments. But one of the things I'll just click on that. I think even more so, the need for data is so critical because as these things change or broaden, et cetera, it's really the data and hopefully the proactive data. The vision I see is where you're actually not allowed to do certain things as you're trying to do them because it's going to conflict with something that's either existing or coming down the pipe. So definitely, I think we got to bring technology. The solution is so complex, it's moving so fast. And I asked the same question just as a reminder. What legislation, regulations should companies be in the lookout for today or coming soon? And I'll throw that to you, Michelle.
Well, I'll reiterate the same ones there that John said. The EPR is, although EPR has been around for a long time, the latest iterations of EPR really are challenging companies in the complexity of data that they need, and they also come with these additional requirements on businesses, such as labeling requirements and reuse requirements for packaging. So those sorts of things are really making that quite an enhanced piece of, people think, oh, EPR has been here forever, but not this EPR. This EPR is quite new, and what we see coming in California and the other 3 US states, that is the new version. It's coming in with all of the facets of things which we've learned from other EPR systems around the world. So it's starting off at a very high benchmark. And I did give a bit of a shudder when the tax topic was talked about, because I can tell you that the complexity we're going through at the moment with helping companies to report to the UK tax, which is due at the end of the month, has been really quite staggering, and the data that's required in order to do that has really put some companies under some pressure of being able to do that accurately. And then, of course, even beyond some of the voluntary standards that we see with Ellen MacArthur and the Plastics Pact, there's also a whole host of other ESG reporting which looks at packaging, such as GRI standards, SASB standards, DJSI, and those things are all companies, when they sign up to those ESG standards, they also have to provide packaging related data into that as well. And don't forget single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is still in transition process coming through Europe right now.
Yeah, no, it just obviously listening to you as close as I am to it just continues to say how complex the world is we're going into. And Prashant,
Yeah.
love to hear your thoughts on kind of what you're seeing today and in the future.
Yes. So first of all, I think both John and Michelle have done a pretty good job, talking about all the different regulations around the world, the trends thereof. So I won't add to that. Instead, what I'll say is, how do companies really, react to all that, right? How do they deal with all these things? So one thing, that you see up on the slide is organizations like the SPC, becoming members of, organizations like that, because that helps you really be amongst, a network of people that are all trying to deal with the same things. And so learning from that, we are biased perhaps, but, we, as in our software, was actually conceived at the SPC and was funded there many years back. So, we work with them very closely and have a special bond. But there are many other organizations around the world. Even, there are places like in Australia, there is the Australian, Packaging Covenant, and organizations for that. There's the World Packaging Organization. So many different packaging and sustainability organizations that you ought to, become part of, and involve yourself in some of the collaboratives or projects that they might have. At the SPC, for example, there is groups on reusable packaging, compostable packaging, flexible packaging. So all of these things, there are common problems that everybody's relating with, right? So work with them and be part of the solution.
You nailed my next question very well, which I was going to say, for those companies that are trying to, maybe jump into this and get involved either individually as a company is exactly what my questions would be. I'll throw it first to you, Michelle, and you kind of answered it, Prashant, but how do they get involved? I know everybody's involved in SBC, certainly a great organization, but what's your advice, Michelle, and kind of what Prashant was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit, of course, of being in a group like that is that you are absolutely amongst like-minded people who are trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve, and working together can only make that quicker and faster. I think the thing I like about some of the more voluntary groups, like Ellen MacArthur Foundation, for example, is that everybody is absolutely singing to the same song sheet as well. You know, there are 4 targets. Companies sign up to those commitments. In some cases, there's more, but you know, there are core commitments that all companies say that they're going to work towards and going to achieve. And so it absolutely focuses businesses' minds on the things they need to do to change and pivot to make themselves fit those criteria.
No, I love what you both said, which is so paramount is, we can't do this alone. I really believe in an open community and sharing amongst many, because it is such a massive challenge, but it's so important, so critical. And so the sharing of information is very important, and certainly one of the reasons we do things such as this. And so now we open it up to a part to ask the experts. You'll see that I don't get a question here because I'm not an expert, but I will excited to kind of ask some questions and hear the thoughts of the experts in kind of the field. And so one of the questions I'm going to ask, Michelle, there are 400 plus total EPR regulations, and how do companies manage this growing complexity?
With difficulty, I think it's probably the easiest way to describe it. But I mean, the EPR regulations there, the EPR comes in multiple formats. I know we've really focused on packaging in this session, but EPR comes with end-of-life vehicles, with electronics, with batteries, with textiles, with hazardous products, with carpets, mattresses, you name it. Nowadays, you can probably find an EPR scheme or organization that will help support end-of-life of materials and also products. And so, the first thing companies always need to understand is what is the legislation in a country that they're selling into, and do they have any legal responsibility to report and pay and be involved in the end of life process of their products. And that a few years ago, that probably wasn't anywhere near as much as it is now, but certainly that should be the first thought on any business's mind when they look at placing products into the market, is how will they recover them when they're finished, and how will they bring them back. And EPR systems, certainly from an electronics and batteries perspective, build in that end of life piece to it. So they bring in take back programs and how businesses can recover their products at the end of their use. So the thing they can do really from a complexity perspective is to try and understand the different nature that you find within EPR programs. And all EPR systems are different. It's the beauty of the system. But what it means is that you can find yourself in scope in one market and out in another. So it's really important to understand the nuances of the legislation in each market or jurisdiction.
Michelle, I'm not going to ask you any more questions today, so I'm going to take a quick pause. I want to thank you for joining this panel. Certainly, please listen into the balance of it. But any last comments you'd like to share before I jump to the next question? No, thank you very much for having me today. It's been wonderful to be on the panel, and I really think it's great to have a discussion on this, and it's great results that you had from the survey. Thank you. No, so refreshing to have you involved, and I really appreciate your time as always. And so I'm going to jump to my next question, and John, I'm going to hand this one off to you. Gartner predicts 90% of public sustainability packaging goals won't be met by 2025. What should companies be doing now to ensure they can meet their goals in the future?
Yeah, Matthew, I think really what's critical here is to take a data-driven approach in setting and executing the goals. And I say that as opposed to basing goals, let's say, solely on consumer research or high-level, targets. I mean, I think there's definitely a role for, consumer research, customer research, and there's definitely a great contribution and benefit that the different foundations are delivering for us and inspiring us to, to really strive. But I think an aspect of overlooking the data, overlooking kind of the nuances of our product, our packaging requirements, and as well the ecosystem, that needs to be mapped. So, working with material recovery facilities, working with our suppliers, working with our consumers and customers, I think all has to be integrated. And finally, I'd say there's a much greater need for collaboration than what we've seen to date. I mean, we need greater collaboration with our suppliers, with the local governments, municipalities, even with our competitors, because to achieve, some of these aspects that we all desire, it's really going to require this ecosystem collaboration.
I love how you wrapped it up, because I do agree with you. I think that we all can. It's good for all of us. It's good for everybody. It's good for the planet, obviously. And so working together really is not negative. It's really positive in outcomes that can be attained. And so much like Michelle, John, I'm not going to grill you anymore, but love and appreciate your participation as always. Would throw it back to you if you have any additional closing comments while we move forward.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. And like I say, this is just incredibly compelling space. The pace of change in the past 2 to 3 years has just been remarkable, and overdue. So I guess I just say, recognize that, sustainability and packaging is here to stay, and we really need to be pragmatic and again drive that collaboration and ecosystem mindset.
Thank you, as always, John. And jumping to my next question, Prashant, you're the last person standing, so this is going to be your question. Well, R&D accounts for 5% or less of the total cost of product. It influences up to 80% of that product's resource footprint. How can companies bring sustainability into R&D? Thoughts?
Yeah, and so Matthew, R&D has always been, this behavior on product cost has always been, cost and sustainability now has always been locked in the early stages of the design of any product. So instead of doing postmortems, which is where life cycle analysis was being used early in my career, now actually bringing it up front in an easy to use solution where designers, R&D people, engineers, sourcing people can all sort of analyze the impact of things and make better decisions. That's really the key to making better decisions. And it's a lot easier to make those changes before your mold is cut for your packaging or any other changes that were made to your manufacturing line, right? So that's the reason why I think it's very important to do these things. And tools, I think, are the main thing in terms of how to do that. And making tools work within your work process as opposed to the other way around, and making sure that, nobody needs to learn new tools. Nobody likes doing that, right? So having tools that fit into what you're doing and let you make proper trade-off choices between what if I want to reduce the footprint of this, then what else am I going to lose, right? Optimization, trade-offs, that's the key. And if you can do that early on in the design cycle, that's the best way to do it.
No, it's great, great insights, Prashant. And certainly, I think we're battling this from two different fronts, which is everything that exists today, and then at the same time trying to get in front of the stuff that's going to exist in the future. And so same with the others. I'd love to take a pause, but thank you for your participation and offer up a few seconds if you want to share anything else before we go forward.
Well, thank you, Matthew, for inviting us, and it's always great to work with you guys. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Prashant, for your time too. Well, thank you, Michelle, John, and Prashant for joining today. I think it was a very dynamic conversation and very valuable. Some takeaways certainly from the survey, and then certainly trying to interweave the experts' knowledge into what the survey is trying to tell us and really what we should be focused on. I think as we go back to our companies and hopefully share this information, I think some of the key things to pull through is it's all industries, it's all verticals are working on this. It's the broadening of the persona, the broadening of the roles or responsibilities that are getting involved in this initiative. It's companies are finding budgets, companies are committed to this top down. And so I think it's a great way to look at your own company, kind of your own role and responsibility, and try to align to where the future's going. I think one of the things we heard without a doubt is we probably all are experiencing this today, is tremendous high complexity both today and in the future. Michelle mentioned if you're in the United States, that 3 states are kind of moving forward on this new EPR regulations, but 47 are probably going to change their version slightly to make the complexity even more, as both regions around the country are going to be doing the same. So really data, tools, collaboration with experts, participation in the right forums are probably the best thing we can do to really work on this together. And I loved what was shared earlier, is this really is a value to working and sharing on this all together because it advantages and helps everybody that works together on this. Now, I love this quote: our specification management system is not just about collecting data, it's also about making a decision that allows us to be focused on carbon reduction. Chris Corbins, who's really a thought leader, developed a whole company around how to be sustainable in creating product, is really a great person to listen to, and kind of his thoughts going forward of how we do this. I think that we all would agree, kind of historically, the approach to sustainability that we've all taken is fundamentally wrong. We really need to start with data. We really need to start with that granular level of data, which we obviously call specs, and then you enrich those specs, and then ultimately that helps you with reporting, visibility, action. But at the end of the day, we talked a lot about new product development and really making it right from the beginning in terms of the vision that the company has for sustainability. And so again, if you make products through data, you can put up barriers and walls to allow you to only produce the type of product you want for a geo region or for your, quite frankly, your full product suite. So I think really leaning into technology, leaning into coalitions that create value is what we all need to do today to go forward. So I want to thank everybody for listening in. Definitely, if you want to learn more, please reach out to SpecRite, reach out to Triac, Lorax, and certainly John at Gartner. As you can tell from the vast wealth of knowledge and sharing that they did, they're really good resources to help in this journey towards sustainability. Hope you enjoyed the state of sustainability. The report is available, has a lot more data and details in there. So please reach out and get your copy. And we look forward to chatting again in the future. Thank you.